My first real job that I had when I turned 18 was a call center job in sales. And let me tell you, I do not look back on those years. Now, granted, I still work a call center job in another company. However, it's not in sales. It's not cold calling. It's basically just receiving inbound calls and being tech support, really. And you can say whatever you want to say about call centers in general. But I think just receiving inbound calls and doing tech support is the lesser of all other call center evils, so to speak. Now, the thing important to this story to note is right after I finished high school, it was around the end of May or beginning of June, something like that. For the next 3 months, it was all video games on the PS4. There was a game called God of War that came out right around this time, I believe. And I was basically just gaming for like 14, 15 hours over those 3 months. Going to sleep at around 4 to 5 a.m. and waking up at like 1 to 2 p.m. And it was already bad even before summer started. And that was basically what my circadian rhythm consisted of. When summer ended, it was high time for me to finally land an entry-level job somewhere, as my academic prowess proved to be pretty fruitless for any further education, at least at that time. And upon further inspection, I decided, as my fitness journey had began about a year and a half ago at that time, I figured the less I had to physically strain, the more energy I'll have to dedicate to my workouts. And as such, I wanted to make sure the job I worked was, as you'd classify it, white collar. Since I didn't have that much to offer on my resume, the closest thing that I could find for myself were call centers. And one such call center accepted, marketed as tech support with an emphasis on sales. What a combo. This is where things start going downhill fast. And not because I'm a freshly baked teenager who's just joining the 40-hour week workforce and already dreading every minute of being there, but because if we remember what I said about my circadian rhythm, you'll know that I'll obviously start to do shifts that obviously aren't in line with what my sleep schedule was at that time. And that's exactly what happened. I had to wake up at around 7 a.m. to get to work by 8 a.m. and start my day. I was used to going to sleep at 5 a.m. and thus for the first couple of weeks I was routinely getting about 2 to 3 hours of sleep at the most per workday. And I remember vividly the kind of toll it was taking on my mental health. Now, I know some of you might say, well, okay, yeah, but you get used to it. You get used to getting up at 7 a.m. every day to the point where you'll start to routinely go to bed earlier and earlier. And that may be true up to a point. You see, when you spend the vast majority of your life as a night owl, it creates a sort of routine. Yes, I was able to go to bed as early as 9 p.m. so that I could have more than enough leeway, so to speak. But I could never consistently get that coveted 8-hour mark of sleep to actually give me a productive workday. And over these years, I've formulated a couple of reasons as to why that is the case, and why it is still to this day the case. Briefly, however, I want to mention the importance of sleep itself. Its benefits stretch to simply so many areas of life, be it productivity, be it increased focus and mental clarity and overall better sense of well-being, stimulation of producing, hormones that aid you in overall health. The benefits just simply transcend what I could cover in just one video. So as such, we'll focus on the benefit that aids us in our little niche on this channel, which is of course fitness. Stimulation of growth hormone and whatnot allows us to maintain and increase our muscle mass, help to recover our nervous system and give us those strength gains after workouts so that the next time we show up we're stronger and whatnot. Obviously, me being an OCD-esque person, I wanted to make sure when I learned the importance of sleep at that time was to maximize as much sleep as possible. But this proved to bite me from behind later down the road. The more I wanted to make sure that I fell asleep at night as fast as possible, the more it kept me awake, so to speak. When I was working that job at those mostly morning hours, it was always the most anxiety-inducing, tiredness-inducing, stress-inducing time that in addition made my fitness journey getting more muscular all the more difficult. It wasn't a surprise. I always felt better whenever I worked afternoon shifts. because almost all the time I managed to rake in over 8 hours of sleep during those days, and here's the reason why. As most of the working class can relate to, studies have shown that the vast majority of those people get less than the recommended amount of sleep, stemming from all kinds of life stressors. For me, however, I managed to boil it down to a couple of factors. Every night when I went to bed, I started getting anxious of, man, if I don't get these 8 hours of sleep tonight, my workday tomorrow is going to absolutely kill me. I don't know how I'll manage to get through. Which actually managed to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. By stressing over the fact of whether I was going to get this sleep or not this night, I managed to keep myself awake just long enough to actually see most of the night through, with my eyes wide open staring at the ceiling. And this ended up being routine whenever I was working those morning shifts, and even still to this day. People that can relate to this kind of problem obviously want to ask the inevitable question of, okay, but give us the secret sauce and unburden us from this fate. And sorry to say, but even I cannot fully master the art of 8 hours of sleep at night. Not always, anyway. And I have my own theories as to why that's the case. And it all stems from an evolutionary perspective. When we stress on whatever thing that is that day, let's say stressing over how big of a work day we have the next day, we're going to actively hope as we go to bed that we get the necessary rest we'll need in order to be able to cope with that next day. And in turn, by creating those thoughts around our mind, we induce the same kind of anxiety that triggers our fight or flight response and keeps us in that state for as long as we keep inducing that same anxiety into our minds. And the rest obviously becomes history. You barely manage to sleep for 3 to 4 hours before getting rudely awakened by the sound of your alarm at 7 a.m. To this day, I always look to work mostly afternoon shifts for this very reason. I look for things that will give peace of mind at a time that I'm going to need it the most. At night, when we're recovering the most. By agreeing with my employer that I work mostly afternoon hours, I immediately start getting more relaxed about going about my sleep schedule, knowing I won't be waken up by an alarm, and consequently, I'll also look for other things to give me additional peace of mind, at least for the time being, that is, at night. That's going to make sure I'm not having my fight or flight mode triggered. Obviously, a lot of people have life happen to them, so to speak, that cannot simply be ignored. You have family, you have kids, you have a business to run and whatnot, and it obviously shouldn't be ignored. What should be done is getting into a routine that, regardless of circumstances, should allow you not to overthink about the things that give you the most stress at night, to the point where it keeps you awake. And it instead will allow you to actually enter that sort of Zen mode of being content with whatever actually happens the next day. By being content and not overthinking the things that will induce anxiety, you automatically make sure you can have your body focus on recuperative aspects of your routine, sleep being no exception. Getting into that habit of getting 7+ hours of sleep will automatically create a positive feedback loop that's going to allow you to continue in that trend and reap the benefits that more sleep usually gives. And as such will allow other aspects of your life to flourish, as now the newly acquired mental acuity, restlessness and readfulness, so to speak, will aid you in whatever endeavor you're after. For me, being able to maximize my strength gains is paramount. I enjoy what I do in my spare time, and obviously, I would love to get a full night of rest every night. But I have to accept the notion that things are never perfect and never will be perfect. But by accepting that notion, I automatically set up an environment that's going to give the least amount of stress-inducing emotions that will ruin my sleep schedule and in turn make sure I maximize whatever amount of sleep I'll be able to get that night. Every person has to figure out for themselves what kind of things, routines or whatnot will allow them to enter that Zen mode of accepting that there are always things that you cannot control, and that by not wasting your time thinking about the things you cannot control, you automatically allow your body to be in a constant state of anabolism, as the bodybuilders like to say. And that anabolism obviously peaks when you're sleeping. When you sleep, that is when you rebuild the most. I guess that's my answer to that initial question. You guys individually have to figure out for yourself how to enter that peace of mind you need at night the most. But when you do, and you start seeing results from more sleep, you'll know you're doing something right.